So, Mr. Chair, it's 9:30, and I do believe we have quorum.
I've got 9:29. Okay, now it's 9:30. You're right. For once. Okay, so welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee, the meeting of Wednesday, February 10th. And we do have a confirmation of a quorum. So I'll call this meeting to order. And the first item is the adoption of the public agenda.
Move adoption. Second.
Okay. No changes, additions, etc. Okay, we have under petitions and delegations, item D, we have Galvin Harbor Views, bylaws 94 and 95. We have Rick Schelling, the owner, and Dan Bowen, the consultant. We're going to make a presentation regarding the Galvin Harbor Views development proposal. Dan and Rick, welcome. You have 10 minutes between the two of you. It's total 10 minutes to address the board. And then the board may ask you questions if they have questions or not. It's up to them. So I don't know if both of you are planning to speak or one of you, but you have the floor. And we're timing.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Dan will be speaking after me. I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to speak to them today. My name is Rick Schelling. I was born and raised in Comox Valley. I have a degree in forestry engineering from UBC. I've worked in the forest industry for more than 48 years as an engineer, heavy equipment operator, owner-operator of RJ Timber Products, which is a company that was involved with silvicultural contracts with both the government and private landholders. I'm also the owner of District Lot 208, which is the main topic of this discussion. District Lot 208 is a 158-acre lot with 10,000 feet of waterfront that I acquired 20 years ago. 12 years ago, I began laying out the foundation for rezoning and OCP amendments on this property. This involved a considerable amount of field work and consulting contracts. These contracts included many aspects: resurveying the entire property with multiple plan designs, drilled and tested wells to establish relative volumes and quality of water, established perk areas for sewage treatment, archaeological report, geotechnical report, vegetative management and environmental impact report on the park dedication areas, stormwater management plans, topographical mapping of the lot, correspondence with local First Nations. Regional district staff sent out referrals 11 years ago. Over the past 11 years, there have been numerous delays and setbacks. We have held 3 open houses on Quadra and have used the feedback to revise our proposal. I have offered to meet with any individual or group to have a walkabout on the property or to discuss any concerns. We have had countless meetings and correspondence with the regional staff. We have had a number of meetings with Director Abrams. We all with the intentions of fine-tuning this proposal and moving ahead. We were asked by the regional district staff to hold off on our application while the village concept plan was dealt with. This set us back for 3 years. We were told in the first year that instead of on-site sewage treatment, that proposal was contingent on using established sewer lines and hooking up to the local sewage system. We agreed to this at the time. The commitment from the regional district was not given until June of 2019, over 10 years later. Shortly after receiving the sewage hookup commitment from the regional staff engineer, we conducted another open house on Quadra. With the current feedback, we once again fine-tuned our proposal and tried to get staff to move ahead with a public hearing. This has been going on now for more than 1.5 years. I understand that COVID has made things difficult over the last year, but zoning changes are moving ahead in other jurisdictions and in this district too. The fact of the matter is we don't know when things will get back to what we consider normal. To delay our application once again while others move forward seems wrong to me. I'm asking the board through the chair to allow this process to move forward. Have to say.
Thanks, Rick. As time is of the essence here, I'll move right ahead with my report. Yeah, many thanks to the chair and the board for allowing. Pardon me? Yeah, many thanks to the board and the chair for allowing us to present virtually. My name is Dan Bowen. I'm a development consultant and specializing in development planning, rezoning, and subdivisions. I've been doing this type of work for over 40 years. So when I took on this project, I wanted to design a plan that would protect the property ecosystem values as well as align with the community values. And I'll mention again, as Rick has said, this is quite an amazing property in a key location, 64 hectares, 3,000 feet of waterfront, and has some of the last old growth forest and mixed forest ecosystems on Southern Quadra Island. As noted in the staff report, the present OCP designation is silviculture in bylaw 3050. And the present zoning is RU1, the minimum lot size of 4 hectares. This is what this rezoning application is all about. The staff report was amended recently and updated last year to reflect the input and changes over time, as Rick had mentioned. And we agree with this report and would like to move ahead with the next step in the process. Just like to add that the feature amenity in this that we're pretty pleased about in this whole development is the 2 waterfront parks that we plan to dedicate, one in April Point area, one in Gowland Harbor area. The first on April Point Road will encompass the old growth forest grove, including a small stream, a watershed, and protect the Goose Bay Salt Marsh Estuary. The other face is Gowland Harbor and contains another old growth forest ecosystem. Total park area proposed is 12.4 hectares or about 30 acres of waterfront. The remaining green space under the covenant will be made up of the shoreline areas and a total of 40% green space as noted in the report. We support preserving old growth forest ecosystems and always have in this proposal. And therefore, we think that designated park along with conservation areas is the best way to protect these forests. These areas will become a legacy for future generations. We also plan to install 2.6 kilometers of sewer line from about the Quadra School along Anderson Road to Harbor Brook and also along April Point Road. This is a substantial investment and a substantial cost and a real benefit to the community as well. The plan over time will be phased and we'll look at maybe the April Point area first, the Harbor Brook area second, and perhaps a phase strata third. As Rick mentioned, the major delay was the confirmation of the sewage treatment plant capacity. And this was confirmed by the engineering, Regional District Engineering, and basically gave us the green light to move ahead with the next step and being, I believe, a public hearing. And now we are prepared to move ahead with that. We agree with the amendments and noted in the planning report, and we would like to proceed to the next step, which I believe is a public hearing. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I can just jump in quickly, just for some clarity, because I heard both Rick and Dan speak to, you're presenting to the Electoral Area Services Committee. This is not the board. This is a committee of the board. So just to clear any understanding, if you will, that this is not the board you're addressing. It's a committee of the board.
Right. Okay. The committee. Okay. Thanks. Was there any questions?
sorry, we make recommendations to the board, not decisions. Okay, so, yeah, are there any questions from directors? Questions of the delegation? No debate, no questions.
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation and your patience. It's been a long process. I remember walking the land with you shortly after being elected a long time ago. I read in the staff report that it's gone back and forth a few times between 1 hectare and 2 hectare lots proposal. The 2 hectare lot, I gather, being not required to hook up to sewer, and the 1 hectare being required to hook up to sewer. So now that you have the go-ahead to hook up to the sewer line, I just want to clarify that you are now proposing 1 hectare lots. And if that's the case, does that allow more lots or more green space? Just how has the proposal changed from the most recent 2 hectare lot version to the 1 hectare lot version? And what's the rationale for that? Thank you.
Do you want me to address that then? Yeah, the hooking up to the sewer line, and the amendment to the bylaw states that it would be going to a 1 hectare density, and that was because if it's a 2 hectare density, then the sewer line wouldn't be required, and then it would just go to a conventional sewer system, a septic system. And that was something that I believe that we were informed that would be the recommendation by the regional district, as well as Jim Abrams, who was supportive of the sewer line. So that's what caused it to go that direction. And with regard to the dedication for green space, we've tried to remain fairly consistent with our park dedications and our green space. We had more green space previously in the previous presentation or plan, and that was because we had made building envelopes on each lot, and which would allow green space around those building envelopes. The regional district planning had noted that would be difficult to manage, and so that's was kind of the reason we stepped away from that concept. So we're at 40% green space at this point, and that's parks as well as covenants.
So just out of abundance of clarity, so the shift from a 2 hectare to a 1 hectare density, has that in effect doubled the number of residences proposed then?
I don't think the 2 hectares was never really a formal presentation to the regional district. It was an option that we talked about throughout this process, but it was never wasn't something that was before presented to the board or to the regional district formally. It was just a discussion.
Sure. So what you have at present are all the lots. Is there no lot smaller than 1 hectare, or is it a 1 hectare sort of 1 lot per hectare average?
Yeah, it's worked on the density. So yeah. You can go smaller than 1 hectare. Yeah. Obviously, and that's what density is. And so some of the lots will be smaller than 1 hectare. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But it's worked on the density of the calculation that was set out by the RD. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Brenda, go ahead.
Thanks. So to the delegates, what is the situation on water in that area? Obviously, if you're going to have, 60 plus residences there, you're going to be running a water system. This, under Island Health's new regulations, would likely cost millions of dollars for you to be a purveyor of water to all those lots. Have you submitted plans for water treatment for these lots to Island Health?
Yeah, no, Brenda, good question. It's a challenging one, and we haven't submitted anything formally yet because we were not at that step where we should be doing that. Just as we're not at the formal step of putting in the sewer line and getting those applications in order. However, we have been in consultation with our consultants regarding small water systems, as well as consultants with regard to the procedure, which is a bit difficult. But the plan is that with the water supply that we have, and we're planning on actually drilling another well to support a small water system under the Health Act.
Okay, we recently had a development about your size out at Browns Bay, and they were going to put in sewer and water for the community out there. And they came back to the regional district to request that regional district supply those services, because I mean it's pretty expensive and under Island Health's regulations. And I believe the regional district responded that, you know, it would cost the residents at Browns Bay over $1,000 for each of the sewer and water service if the regional district were to take it over. So it's something to think about in your development. You should think about it up front rather than later when people don't have water.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or approved water, because Island Health is very strict these days about water purveyors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recognize, as being in this business for a fair number of years, that this is a huge challenge dealing with the VHA regulations, and we have consultants that will be assisting us in on that subject. And yeah, as soon as we have some movement here and we're moving ahead with the public hearing, and it looks like we're going to hopefully at fourth, I believe at fourth reading, that's when you start to shift gears and get those types of things in order formally, and that's what we plan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions, Carol? Okay, the only question I have for you, Dan or Rick, is when we met, the last time we met, this is pre-COVID. We met in the regional district office downstairs with staff, and the main question that I had, or the main suggestion that I had made to you guys, was that the commercial campground, cabins, marina, etc., were going to be very problematic, and that if they were removed, you might have an easier time of going through this process. Since then, I've certainly looked at the area that is proposed for the campground area and the cabins in the marina, and off of April Point Road. I don't know how many of you directors and staff know I've ever been down April Point Road, but it is basically a one-lane road all the way out to April Point. I do not see any possibility, having been in many, many commercial campgrounds in my life, I can't see how you could possibly move RVs, trailers, fifth wheels, campers, etc., in and out of that spot. And I do not believe it's feasible nor advisable. And I do not feel that it is advisable to be putting a marina in at the extreme limit of where the water comes into that tidal flat. That's very, very important, sensitive ecosystem for all species, and you've got a marina butted right up against it. And whether or not it would even, at low water, even be having water in it, I don't know. I'm not the expert on that, but those are the sort of main components that we talked about and that I understood that you were going to reconsider. I do not see them reconsidered in this proposal that's before us today. So, maybe you can just give me a quick 25 words or less as to why not.
Yeah, I guess I'll address some of the questions you had, Jim. As you know, I worked for the Ministry of Transportation for 30 years, so I'm kind of an expert when it comes to traffic and traffic movement. And you're right, April Point Road isn't the best road, although it's functioned there for 40 years. Back in the heydays when April Point Lodge was going full bore, there was much traffic out that way, and the road certainly handled it okay. Part of the process of the subdivision, of course, is upgrading parts of April Point Road, putting in a walkway along that road for safety, which was part of a previous presentation. As far as the access in and out of the planned area for the commercial, that would be constructed to specifications that would allow, the movement in and out of fifth wheels and trailers, as you mentioned. So it would have to be constructed properly, and that would be under the terms and conditions of access with the Ministry of Transportation. So that part could be remedied, and the volume of traffic to this campsite wouldn't justify a traffic jam or anything like that in this area. It's pretty small volumes, and of course it would be seasonal. With regard to the marina, it's basically a marina that you can tie your boat up to. It's not a boat launching area, and it would be something that when we looked at this whole development, when you have this many waterfront lots and this little number of we're kind of creating a little community here. We kind of thought the commercial aspect, you could walk down to the area and have a coffee type of thing. You have a campsite there. It was just kind of a real friendly, diversified type of approach to a development versus a monoculture of all lots being exactly the same with no features of other zonings. On the property, of course, we do have our agricultural lot. It's a 15 acre agricultural lot. And we have our country residential lots. We have one commercial lot. It was kind of like a bit of a diversification. And at the beginning, I do know that we talked about this, Jim, and you kind of noted that this might be a good idea for this side of the island, because the only other areas where RVs and camping are is you have to go completely across the island to Rebecca Spit, and it's just an extra feature that we thought would be positive, and that's the only reason we put it in there, is because and the more we thought about it, the more it made sense. So that's kind of why we left it in there. If it was just what we thought was positive. So that's basically all I can say about it.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think it's still problematic, but that's.
Yeah.
Can I point out something that I noticed in the application that in the planning Schedule A of bylaw 95 that is kind of problematic for me, and that is it talks about a campground, meaning the occupation of land maintained for temporary accommodation for the traveling public, but it doesn't define temporary. And every campground that has developed, including Browns Bay, Eagle Point, Rock Bay, all these oceanside so-called campgrounds, they become RV permanent occupation sites. Nobody comes for, and it doesn't have any definition in the bylaw of what is temporary. Is temporary a 10-year period? Is out of someone's life? Is temporary a 30-day period? It isn't defined. And I can see, because of the beauty of Gowland Harbor, that people won't want to come there and just stay there for 30 days and leave. They're going to come and hook up to all the amenities that are available, and they're going to be semi-permanent residences all year round. And none of the RV parks in Area D, I have about 5 of them, big ones: Salmon Point, Glen Alder, Shelter Point, Shelter Bay. People have lived in those RV parks for 20 and 30 years. They're not campgrounds and they're not RV sites. And I think we should call them what they are. They're places where people are going to live all year round, and there won't be any limit, and the regional district would have no hope of enforcing against them, because people could just move their unit from one spot to another and back again. I just don't think that, I think that's a flaw in the bylaw, actually.
Yeah, you're right, Brenda. This was brought up a few years ago as well. And it's simply a matter of the regional district's planning staff putting the proper definition in there. And this exact thing you're right, it happens all over in the regional district in the Comox Valley here. It comes up as well. And they have, I believe, some language in the bylaw under definition of temporary, which would say, for example, 1 month or something like that, or whatever it might be. But that's a simple text amendment that should, you're absolutely right, we would agree with that 100%, that would be something that the regional district should recognize and put in the correct definition of temporary.
Excuse me, my mic was muted accidentally. I've been yelling at you, Dan, but I haven't been able to get in there. But it is written in there, Monica, that it was a 2-week stay, and it's 20 sites, and it's a 2-week stay was the maximum. Because I had feedback from the community that they didn't want a trailer park, and I said, well, why do you think it's a trailer park? And that's for exactly what you're talking about, Brenda. But in our proposal, it was a 2-week stay had been stipulated as the maximum time to be spent there. As addressing the road, that road is the only road I know of that I can stop my truck in the middle of, open the door and talk to somebody with their car with their door open for 5-10 minutes and not have to worry about anybody taking our doors off, because the traffic on there is virtually none. As far as the marina goes, at a 0 tide, there's 11.5 feet underneath my dock that is in place now. And the rest of the mud flats further up are remnants of the old dump site that was in there. So it's, marina wise, there's oodles of water there.
Yeah, if I could just mention on the 2-week stay, I went through the bylaw that's before us today, and we'll be going through that later. But basically, there isn't a 2-week definition.
Okay, I wonder if maybe that was when Aniko and we were meeting. Maybe that's in the master development plan that she was putting together. I'm not sure, but I know it was discussed. Yeah. So
I'm sure it has been, and we'll get to that later. But are there any further questions of the delegation?
I do have one more, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think in this time of seemingly inevitable sea level rise in the relatively near future, and our efforts even at the regional district to do sea level rise mapping, that it would be incumbent upon us to see the projections for the next decades in terms of sea level rise here, given the extent of waterfront and the low-lying nature of April Point Road, etc. So I completely concur that this should go to public hearing and not have a whole bunch more delays. And I'm not suggesting that this be a delay step, but I would like to see a topographical map presented in this application and presented to public hearing that shows, you know, a modest sort of, I know there's lots of different suggestions around how fast and how much sea level rise will happen, but it could model out a couple of different scenarios so people have some sense. Because I, having walked it a decade ago, don't remember what areas that are being proposed for development would be vulnerable to that. And it's something that we're beginning to look at here on Cortez. And there's a number of, you know, critical roads and infrastructure here that may well be underwater in my daughter's lifetime. So I think it really incumbent on us to plan. So would you be able to submit, as an addition to information, some topographical sea level rise mapping possibilities for this, please?
Yeah, I can speak a bit to that. I also in my work, I'm dealing with sea level rise on many of the projects I'm working on with Project Watershed. All of our designs have got to take into consideration. So we have hydrodynamic engineers working on our projects. So, and of course, we have a beautiful topographical plan of the property. There's probably not too many areas that are subject to flooding with storm surge, etc. But because the property rises up pretty well, all the waterfront rises up, and those areas that don't rise up are the areas where small streams come down, and those are the two areas where we're going to dedicate the park. And that there won't be any building in those areas. So of the 3,000 meters of waterfront, about 2,000 are probably all have fairly steep slopes. And on those slopes around the entire perimeter will be a restrictive covenant for no building, already based on geotechnical and archaeological and all kinds of other concerns, just the fact that it's steep ground. And the building areas are all up on the platform, the top area of the property. But there's not a problem with getting a assessment on sea level rise. I do have the rates somewhere in on my reports that I can speak to that as well, and perhaps take the topographical and put a red line around the shoreline at, I think it's 2.5 meters above the high tide mark is the new elevation, getting us ahead for 50 years, which is probably as far as most people are thinking ahead. But yes, that's a good point.
I would really appreciate that, and certainly we don't know how much it's going to rise and how fast, but that we're thinking on that and mapping that out. It's a very simple mapping exercise, and I wonder how it would impact the marina development, for instance. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, okay.
I have one comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, people sometimes forget that the West Coast landmass is rising faster than any projected sea level rise. I think it's a red herring.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I could just
time.
I have one more question. Will the public have open access to this resort, or will there be gated? Will it be gated with some kind of lock mechanism at the top?
No.
Will the public have free and open access to this area still?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, it would be open. And in fact, we were looking at trying to set up, I've been in contact with a couple firms to set up some kind of kayak launches off of the dock so that people can launch in and out of the dock, especially older people like me that want to go kayaking but don't like falling in the water when we're trying to get into it. And so, no, we have looked into that, and I've actually talked to the local kayak shop and asked them if they would be interested in using it as a send-off point for that, and they were very interested in it. So no, it would be open to the public.
And so, and also one more question. So I think it was this property that has a 2-story building floating in front of it somewhere, right?
Yes, it's tied up to my dock temporarily. Yeah.
Is it going to be moved?
Yes, yes. It's
Like before the hearing?
before when?
Well, when we go to public hearing, that could be a sore point for the public. So just
Sure.
saying if it's still there.
No, it's slated. It's only supposed to be there for a couple months.
Yeah, yeah.
They're waiting for the weather patterns to change so they take them around to the outside of the island.
Okay.
It's for quite hot sound. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so thank you very much, Rick. We've been 35 minutes. I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it off there.
Okay,
So,
well,
Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Move receipt of the delegates' presentation. Move
Seconder.
receipt.
Second.
any opposed? That's carried. Okay, adoption of previous minutes.
Move adoption.
Move adoption. Second.
Okay, any discussion? Any opposed? Carried. Any business arising from the minutes? See, hearing none. Public considerations, none. Chair's report, none. We have under item I, staff reports. Item number 1, development variance permit application for Crombie.
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Receipt to
I'll
the CAO.
second.
Okay,
Thank
move
you, Miss.
Pardon?
Yep, no, just thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Annika will speak to this for us.
Thank you. Through the chair to the committee. The Crombie variance application was referred back to staff following the last presentation to the committee, pending further circulation of the proposed development to the surrounding neighborhood, and given additional concerns with respect to the size of the variance requested for the guest dwelling on the property currently under construction. Subsequent to the last EASC presentation, staff circulated the proposal to a wider group of residents, a total of 19 residents within the neighborhood. And the map of those residents are provided within this report on page 3. 9 responses have subsequently been received from those residents for state objection, and 5 of those, or sorry, 4 state no objection, and 5 of those state an objection to the development based on the size of the building. Given the considerations presented above and the details that have been received from the discussions at the committee level and those in the report and letters that have been received, we do acknowledge that this variance request is considered significant. However, that does not prevent us from giving consideration to the development. The initial support for the application was found and was substantiated given similar housing variances in the past, and given the short supply of housing on the island, including varied housing types. The housing studies that have been done on the island confirm that there is a need for additional housing and smaller housing and housing for families. However, given the perceived impact that we've now received from the neighboring communities and the uncertainty as to what the community expects or would like to see limited with respect to dwelling sizes, we cannot support the variance at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hanako. Are there any other commenters on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
This is on receipt.
Understood.
ahead.
I appreciate the extra due diligence of staff on this one. It is a very, very awkward one to deal with, but I think really important to give good consideration to. Two questions specifically on this application. Then if this variance is denied, my understanding is that the addition is well underway. What would be the requirement then of the property owner? Would it be indeed to not inhabit the addition or to take down the addition, or what would be required to be in compliance? And then my second question, I'll really defer to our budget discussions around planning, because it does seem that there is, and I certainly don't know Quadra intimately, but I know that there's a lot of housing pressure there, just like here. There may well be an interest in having a larger discussion around density and is the cabin size appropriate, etc. So I'd love to have a discussion in our planning section of the budget about what are our long-term planning discussions for all of our rural areas in the face of housing. And then my final question is simply the definition, I believe, in the zoning bylaw pertaining to this that says guest accommodation or guest cottage. And is there clear definitions for that? Because it seems difficult to me that this variance was originally recommended, given that it was clearly for a year-round residence and not guest. So how can we either define guest better, or eliminate that, or just not be in these situations where clearly the intended use is not what is defined in the bylaw, as far as I can tell? Thanks.
Okay, I will have a motion to make further on after everybody's had a chance to speak, but if I could just answer two of those questions. Yes, we do need to talk about housing in general, both islands. And secondly, guest, the word guest is historic from the original bylaw. Guest cottage was meant to mean a 640 square foot cottage for people to come and stay as a guest. In these properties, the size of these properties only allows for one dwelling, principal dwelling, and one historic guest cottage, where guest is being, the definition is changing, and the need is certainly changing. So that's got to be looked at. But are there any, before I go any further, are there any other comments on this?
Yes, I have a comment, Director Lee.
The bylaw, I did have some questions that weren't answered there.
Pardon me?
I did have some questions embedded in what I said that I would like an answer to before we move on.
And what was the question that was not answered?
If we deny this variance, what will be required of the property owner in terms of non-residency or demolition? And given that there may well be a change to the overall, bylaw to either amend the word guest or, deal with the housing issue somehow, would there be some way of not requiring demolition of what has been built, perhaps non-habitation, such that we can have this broader conversation, at which point perhaps this residence is in compliance, and yet it's completely inappropriate to have the residence right now not be used. So I'm trying to get a sense from staff of what would be the requirement of the homeowner here to come into compliance, and how does that relate to this larger conversation that's clearly looming around housing? Thank you.
And if I could please ask that you hold your question until I have brought up my motion, which will answer most of your questions. Okay, Brenda, you were on.
My comment was that currently the bylaw says that you can go up to 860 square feet for the secondary building. That's almost as big as my house that I raised a family in, and it's big enough for a secondary dwelling. And they proceeded with this, they proceeded with their construction without citing permits or anything from regional, without permits. So in my opinion, they don't have to tear anything down, but they do have to live within the bylaws of Quadra Island, and that's 860 square feet. So it's up to them, in my opinion, to make their construction comply with the bylaw like everybody else on Quadra needs to do. And we're not saying they have to tear it down. We're not saying, I don't think we're saying that. I think we're saying you have to comply with the bylaw. So adjust your building to do that. But this idea that you can just go ahead without permission, start constructing something that's way bigger than the bylaw allows is ridiculous. And also, it's up to the people on Quadra Island to change their bylaws. It's not up to any of the rest of the directors to tell Quadra Islanders what they should have in their OCP. When we do an OCP review, then Quadra Islanders will get to set the rules and regs for their area. So, and led by Director Abram. So I think we should leave it up to them. But for now, the bylaw says 860 square feet, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. And just so you know that when it was 640, as we grew, contractors came to me. This is the construction industry came to me and said 640 just doesn't cut it for a young family to live in. It's not big enough. And we went through a whole amendment process of the bylaw at that time to change the size to 861 square feet, which was considered to be an average small 2-bedroom house. So we were trying to accommodate two things, that people could have guests or in-law suites or whatever you want to call them, but that they would still be reasonably small. So that was done, that's in place. And I believe, I'm not sure, I have to look at the exact wording of the bylaw, if it says guest cottage or secondary dwelling, because I know that, there's only one dwelling, principal dwelling allowed on these properties. The other issues, as I said, if we can get to a motion that I have already given to Edith, and if we can get to that eventually, we can see that there may be a solution. I would like to ask staff, your count of 5 and 4, was that taken as of when? Do you know when it was last updated?
Thank you through the chair. The 9 responses that have been received, as far as I know, I did not check with John this morning, but as far as I know, are to date. So this is from the first time the application was circulated to residents up till the time of the writing of the report and the creation of the agenda on Friday.
Okay, so they're as of Friday, because as of the weekend and yesterday, I've received 3 more that are opposed to the development, and you would have those, but they just wouldn't have made it into the report because they came in later. So, the numbers, they really don't make all that much difference. They're expressions of opinion by people that live in the area. So it would put it up to, I don't know, 8 and 4 or something. All right, so then if we could continue on with just the receipt of the report. Is there anything else that people need to say on just the receipt of the report?
No.
All right, hearing none, we'll consider that received and move on to item B, which is February 5th correspondence from Marge Crombie and David Porter, that it be received.
Move receipt.
Second.
Are there any comments? I do have a comment, if no one else does. I absolutely have fought for and defend the direction to create more housing on Quadra Island for people that need it, more full-time housing, whether it be rental or owned, but we do not have enough houses for the number of people that want to live here. And at some point, you know, we're going to have to evaluate what's that number going to be, because we have infrastructure problems beyond compare, with ferries, with roads, with gas stations, with all kinds of different things. So I think that the fact that this was done, although inappropriately, without a siting permit and beyond the limits, is unfortunate, because it is following what I have been trying to do as a director and what our community has been trying to do as a community, especially in the Kwathiaski Cove area, not necessarily out in the, you know, the rural areas of Quadra Island. But that's not to say that we don't need housing in the rural areas. Of course we do. So anyway, I'd just like to say, yes, I'm in favor of receipt of the letter, and we should move on. Is there anything further to be said on the receipt of the letter?
I would just like to say that when it comes to land use planning, we are to consider the land use and the local area bylaws. We're not to consider ownership or the needs of the owners. I've had it happen to me so many times in RED when I was first elected and wet behind the ears, that people would tell me, oh, I need this secondary trailer for my son. And as soon as they get the zoning changed or they get permission, they sell the whole property and take the cash and walk away. And then you've got double the density. So, you know, I've been led down that garden path before, and I feel that we should stick to the bylaws and simply, if you want to have bigger housing spaces for more housing, then change the bylaws first. Don't allow your bylaws to be trodden on, and don't get hung up on who's applying. We're looking at the land itself, not into who's applying.
Just
Okay,
a final
thank you.
Chair, I completely agree with Director Lee, and it is our responsibility as a regional district to keep our zoning bylaws and official community plans up to date and alive, and we were not doing that throughout our region. So although we absolutely need to follow the bylaws, it is also our responsibility to be live to the times and update these. These are living documents, and I think in all of our areas, they are so substantively out of date that they don't meet the needs of communities. So Director Lee is absolutely right that it is completely not my job to say what should be happening on Quadra, but it is all of our job to press these fundamental land use planning documents to be live to people's needs. And they're all, you know, a decade or more out of date. So I would just like to find a way of honoring our bylaws and at the same time, not penalizing people for doing what we absolutely need to be doing in our community. So I look forward to Director Lee's or Abram's motion. And
if I could comment,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the bylaws, the OCP bylaws, zoning bylaws, they're not out of date. They're changed whenever an issue comes up. We can amend the bylaws. I've had several amendments to my OCP. I think my OCP is one of the best planning documents in this region. And even though it's 20 years old, it is current because it gets changed periodically through applications. I have plenty of amendments, and I believe that my area supports our OCP, even though it was adopted in 1996. There's nothing wrong with it. You can't assume that it's bad just because of its age. It's not. And it is a living document.
Okay, thank you, Brenda, and thank you, Nova. And I have to agree with both of you that, yes, our bylaws are amended as needed on an individual basis, according to what Brenda said. We do one-offs throughout the year, every year, but we do need a total look at our bylaws. They are out of date, and we have, put that off year after year after year due to staffing or funding or whatever the reasons, but we do need to take a general look at our bylaws and our OCPs in all areas, I believe, except for Gerald's, because he's lucky enough to not have one. Anyway, so on receipt of B, is that what we're on still? Tom?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. On receipt of B, is there any opposition? Okay, well, that's received. On to C, I would like to make I've put a motion forward to Edie, and I'm not sure if that means that we have to eliminate C. I'd have to ask senior staff. Does that take away item C and replace it with, because I say I'd like to make a recommendation by staff, well, that's in our document. So is this a compiled motion, or does it cover it by saying I would like to move the recommendation by staff to deny and ask that staff work with the applicant to try and reach a suitable compromise, which would take care of, I believe, well, before I get a seconder, I won't speak to it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would suggest that C as written and simply add on from the motion I'm looking at on the screen, the and ask that staff work with, etc. Just add that part on to the existing C.
Okay, I will take your advice and make that motion.
Second.
I'm sorry, I'm the chair. I can't make that motion.
I'll move the motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you. And on discussion, what I intend with this is not that they necessarily have to tear down or make radical adjustments, but that somehow between staff and the owners, that they can come to a compromise in this particular situation to allow the intended end use to take place as soon as possible, so that these children of the owners can live there and work from there and contribute to the livelihood, the vibrancy, and the economy of Quadra Island. So I'm hoping that that's what this recommendation would do. And if we need further motions after that, fine, but let's stick to this one for now. We have a mover and we have a seconder. Is there any further discussion on it?
Yeah, I like your intention. I certainly support the intention. I wonder if there's a better wording other than compromise, because I don't think it's compromise. I think it's you need to follow the bylaw. There's not a compromise about not following the bylaw, but perhaps a amenable solution such that we don't need to get in here, but some portion of the building could be uninhabited, and they could be inhabited up to the maximum allowable area because the existing building is smaller than the maximum, the addition takes it over. But I just don't know that it's compromised. As long as the intention is understood by staff, that's fine, but some kind of workable solution that is within the bounds of the bylaw.
Mr. Chair, yeah, all we have is the ability to work within the bylaw itself. So if that's what's meant by compromise, I mean, the bylaw is there for us. And if the applicant complies with what we believe the bylaw stipulates, then that's fine.
And that was my general intent.
And so then the only question that's left for me is the bylaw states guest cottage or guest accommodation, the word guest. This isn't. So how could we be within the bylaw then? Or do we just turn a blind eye to that, which I'm fine with. I'm just wanting to be clear about what we're doing.
Well, I have to ask our corporate staff, can that guest cottage wording be overlooked in this situation for now with the intent of looking at a better word or better term in the future review of the bylaw?
Well, we're certainly, Mr. Chair, not going to turn a blind eye or overlook something in the bylaw, if that's what the request is.
It's
Okay,
not
maybe
about turning. My
word.
suggestion is that it be treated like every other property that complies with the bylaw in terms of size, but we don't go around enforcing, to my knowledge, length of residency or stay in dwellings. So the fact that these people have voluntarily offered that this is a year-round accommodation, I just don't want them to be penalized for their honesty when in fact I'm sure that's what a lot of these quote-unquote guest cottages are being used for.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, I mean, if there is complaints, we investigate complaints. So
okay.
if that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Okay.
And
I was not suggesting that you turn a blind eye, that you contravene the bylaw in any way, shape, or form. Just that we somehow make allowance for the residency that's really a tenure as opposed to a land use.
All I can say is we'll work with the applicant to comply with the bylaw.
And I would say that, you know, we have guest cottage in the bylaw, and there, you know, we're not supposed to be looking at who owns this. We're looking at the long-term land use. So if this is a guest cottage, it'll be a guest cottage 10 years from now, and somebody else might occupy it. You know, it may be somebody else, but we're staying with land use, not with the applicant. Applicants have a different, you know, we're not supposed to be considering the ownership of the property. We're supposed to be considering the land use. And I feel comfortable with saying that it's a guest cottage for now, and until the OCP gets changed, then fine. You know, but I'm not looking at it from, I'm looking at the long term, and I'm trying to respect the land use plans. I don't think we should get hung up on this particular owner, because that's not what we're here for.
Okay, what we're here for is lack of a siting permit and oversized building, and whether or not we should allow it or not. And the motion is to take staff's recommendation to deny it and work with the owner to come to some sort of agreement that would be suitable to both parties.
To comply with the bylaw.
Can we have the motion on the screen, please, again? Because I think we need to make a friendly to, honestly.
I'll have to rely on Edith to put it back up.
And you'll have to tell me when it's back up. There it is.
That's not the
Wrong
motion.
one. Wrong one, Edith.
So I'd suggest that the add-on say and ask staff to work with the applicant to, come into compliance in a creative
comply
way.
with the bylaw. No, to comply with the bylaw.
To comply with the
Understood.
bylaw.
Understood. However, that can be helping the applicant to look at their options to do so. The applicant might think that their only option is to tear something down.
I agree with the words comply with the bylaw. I'm fine with that.
And Edith, the first part of that motion was deleted up to and ask staff. So I would like to move. That part's been deleted.
It's been deleted and replaced.
Yeah, it's the original motion. And that staff work with the applicant to comply with the bylaw.
Is that to your liking, mover? I seconded it.
Yeah, it's good.
As the director, not as the mover, but as the director, I find to comply with the bylaw too cut and dry. It's not to be disrespectful, but it's bureaucratese. It could say to work with the applicant to help the landowner comply with the bylaw, or something a little gentler than to comply with the bylaw, because it can't comply with the bylaw right now. So you're basically making a motion that's impossible to meet.
Respectfully, I think it's the only motion that we can ask staff to do, though, unless we allow the variance.
We'll allow it to stand as is. Is there any further discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, no further discussion. Is there anybody opposed? So it's carried. Okay, and then the next item is Cortez Island Fire Protection Superior Tanker Shuttle Service.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded on the CAO's report. Is there any discussion on that?
I have a question.
Sure, if it's desired, if it's desired, staff can speak to the report or not, whatever your wish is.
I have one question. Does the $9,000 come out of Area B's budgets? What function would it come out of? Feasibility studies?
If approved, well, if Mr. Chair, if supported and by the committee, the recommendation from staff is that it come out of reserves, and yes, it would be Area B, but that's staff's recommendation. So.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I would support B without having to have a big staff presentation. I read the report.
Sure. Whatever the committee's will is.
Okay, any further comment from the committee?
I just think this is a really proactive move on behalf of the fire department, and I'm glad that the regional district is supporting their work. Thank you. I would receive my full support.
Okay, so on A, CAO's report, anyone opposed? Carried. On B,
Move B.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I do have one question, Mr. Chair, and that's simply a follow-up to Director Lee's question. This is, I'm assuming this is a reserve from the Fire Protection Service function. Are there multiple reserves associated with that function? There's a capital works reserve, and then I believe there's 2 or 3 reserves associated with that. Can I just clarity of which reserve it would be coming out of?
We have it coming out of the operating reserve.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And any further comment? Anyone opposed? Carried. Fire Protection Service, Duncan Bay, Race Point, Electoral Area A, item
Move
3.
receipt.
Second.
Okay, receipt of the CAO's report. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I will have a subsequent motion on this, please.
Okay, so we will go ahead with the CAO's report receipt. Any opposed? Carried. Gerald?
Yes, Edith has my motion, but it's option A from the staff report. I'd move that the electoral area recommend to the board that further report be prepared to, one moment here, investigate the matter of fire protection services being offered to residents in the Duncan Bay and Race Point areas.
Or a seconder?
Second.
Any discussion? Being none. It's carried. Okay, on to item 4, 2021-2025 draft financial plan package.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, sorry.
On receipt of the report, I guess staff would like to make some sort of presentation.
We have, Mr. Chair. So the staff have put together, based on the year ends, the assessments for the electoral areas and input from the one-on-ones. We have consolidated that into a draft financial plan for year that you've seen in the agenda, and Mike has a short high-level presentation on the impacts to each electoral area.
Okay.
Everybody see the screen? Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, are you going to get a presentation?
Yeah, Mike's got it up on his screen. Can you see that?
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we made some big revisions this year to the financial plan document. I hope there's some big improvements anyway. It should be simpler and easier for any of the taxpayers to follow. We're always taking suggestions, so let us know. We actually cut out close to 100 pages, but added a lot more data, so hopefully it's just a lot more efficient to glean information on. At this meeting, we're going to look at the EA portion, and then we'll look at the whole package come 12:30. So as far as the proposed budget timelines, we're just basing them off the next 3 meetings. So this is kind of an introduction, then we can make any changes and then hopefully adopt sometime in early March. We have till the 31st to do the adoption. I'll take any changes I get and incorporate them and produce a recommended plan, and then we'll do a little bit of other cleanup with some carry forwards and such that won't really affect the tax requisition data you see here before you today. So just some quick high-level budget trends, and again, we're going to talk about a lot of this at 12:30 as well. But we had the First Nations joining come April. We have 2 new services, the Home Away from Home and the Library Lending. The Library Lending won't actually have any tax requisition impact just because it's all getting funded by VIRL. We have tax reductions in across some of the admin services just due to staff vacancies, lack of travel, and everything else happening this crazy year with COVID. And just a general theory that we really tried to aim to minimize any tax increases throughout this year. We do that every year, but this year just more than usual, as people are particularly sensitive with their own personal budgets and stuff. So the first thing we'll look at is assessment changes. This chart focuses on the relevant or the relative assessment shift between areas. If one area is at a higher rate than the average, taxes for any of the shared services will shift over to it. If you're less than average, tax will shift away. So these bars represent the total tax base, but residential is usually the largest, by far the largest component of them. So during the budget discussions, we commonly quote residential tax amounts and the impact to average houses. That's often quite a bit higher than what your actual overall tax rate is. So this chart, we look at the actual just the change of the residential values as or relative to the overall change. So when we're talking about residential values, especially if you notice like area A and area D, the residential values there are increasing at a much faster pace than the rest of their tax base. So when we talk about impacts to the average home, the increases are going to be a little bit higher there, except for area C. But yeah, in general, like I say, all these next charts are going to show some tax increases where it's really actually just a shift between classes. So my financial model now fully quantifies all the shifting of assessments, so you can actually see their impact. I'm just going to run through the next set of slides quickly.
May I ask a quick question on this point?
Yes.
Usually, because the formula for tax, net tax is the property assessment times the rate. Usually, we look at what monies are needed to run the functions in the regional district. And if the assessments go up, the tax rate at the SRD goes down. It all balances out. So it's not like because Area D has a 7.6 increase in assessment, it isn't automatic that we're going to see a tax increase, because we're going to lower our tax rate for those functions because we only need a certain amount of dollars to run our services.
Yeah, that's correct, Director Lee.
So it's misleading to say we're going to pay higher taxes because we have higher assessments.
No, okay, if you can let me explain. What he's trying to explain here is that there's a residential class and there's industrial commercial classes. And what he's just trying to explain to you is that there's a shift that in assessments, and they're going from higher in industrial commercial and shifting over to residential. That's what he's trying to explain here. He's not trying to say that the assessments went up this and so your taxes are going up. He says there's a shift in classes.
Yeah, so and this is completely a provincial decision, not a regional decision to shift the weights on the tax classifications from residential, industrial, whatever.
Right. So let's just assume there's a zero increase in a functions budget, okay? And just for argument's sake, let's say a house was paying $1 and a commercial property was paying $2. So for a net of $3. Now all he's saying is there's a shift from other classes to residential. So the residential may, and I'm just making these numbers up, may pay $1.25 and the commercial would pay $1.75, still having a net of $3, but there's just a shift in classes from one to the other.
I got it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and could I ask, why is that shift being made? This sounds like what Campbell River did with the Elk Falls Mill. Every time the mill came in and said, oh, we can't afford our taxes, they dropped the rate for the mill at the industrial rate, and they put it on to the residential householder. And that is exactly what it sounds like this is.
Now, Director Lee's correct, though. This is out of our hands. These are assessment changes and shifts that come from the province. It has nothing to do with us. This is
So they're the ones,
Yeah.
they're the ones that have changed the percentage. Can we get, at some point, a list of the percentages? I believe it used to be, if we're at 0, commercial was at 3 and industrial was at 6.5. Can we please get that number so that when we tell people what the actual percentage of tax is, we'll have it right? Can we please get that number at some point? Not now, doesn't have to be now.
Okay, I have the ready, but yeah, I can send you the list. And yeah, Dave is exactly right. I was just trying to better explain the shift. So the first chart was just showing the shift between areas, and then this chart focuses on the shift between between the various taxes. The reason I was trying to just elaborate on that is because in this presentation, we're going to be talking about the change to the residences. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm just going to give the overall tax increase. Those are always going to be different numbers. So I just wanted anybody who's watching this just to be clear that, there's going to be various rates proposed. So anytime I'm speaking about residential taxes, I'll try and, mention the residential. Other than that, there'll just be the overall tax rate. So that was the point of these two charts.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, for years, the residential rate in rural areas across BC was 1%. So what is it now?
Okay, I think Mike can address that later there, because it's just not as simple as a single number for everybody.
Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah. And just so you know, too, is if you actually look at any one of the services now, we have all the tax rates per house, per class. So it's detailed in every area what the applicable per 100,000 rates are. So the content's there. So first we'll have a quick look at Area A. Area A looks a bit different all throughout the financial package, just because I'm trying to better separate Sayward from Cayucet. They really do act independently with different levels. So the colorful chart in the middle, that's your change to your average household tax. And then the gray chart off to the right measures all these assessment shifts that we're talking about. So if we look at Sayward Valley Fire Protection is a great example. That is a $75,000 a year requisition. It has been for the past several years. There is $0 tax requisition increase here. However, because the residential values have far outpaced the rest of the tax base, it will show a residential tax increase of $1.82. 100% of that increase is due to the assessment shift. So it's not really a tax increase when you're looking at the overall rate. But in these charts, like I say, because we do so much focus on the households, it'll show up here as an increase, but at the end of the presentation, you'll see it's 0. So I just wanted to be no confusion of why we're quoting two different rates. Same thing if you look up at planning 3 rows up, we had a tax cut there. So that was actually a pretty significant tax cut, pushing the rates down. But then we have the assessment in Area A actually having to push that up. So you could actually say there was a $5.99 decline, but the $1.52 assessment shift netted out to a $4.47 change per household per year. And that's just, like I say, the household effect. The Area A, the actual overall tax base is increasing a lot less than what this chart shows. Sorry, I was going to say Cayucet is actually an excellent example of this. Their residential values increased 3.4%, but the utilities in that for like Cayucet Community Hall increased at about 37%. So although the Cayucet had higher residential assessments, the residential taxes are actually going down just because it was outpaced by the utility class. So I hope that makes sense, but I could speak more on that later. So Sayward overall is up $19.18 to $491, and Cayucat's up $464 to $198. The big thing to look at here was the Sayward refuse of the $12.37 increase, but that was just because 2020 was really an anomaly. Director Wally knows of this, but we had a big drop in the expenses, so we dropped the requisition in the following year, and then Comox decided to lower their contribution to the service, so now we just have to increase back up. If you actually look at Sayward and Area A refuse compared to 2019, it's only a 2% tax increase, but this year it's just going to look somewhat magnified.
So just as we move forward, so Mike has consolidated everything you see here and to represent things to the average home. So for example, as we're moving forward, Area A is looking at $19.18 total per home, not per 100,000. That's just total for 2021.
And the last thing I'll mention for Sayward at this point is they've been having some turnover as well, so we're getting some late budget data coming from them. They are looking to replace 2 of the vehicles and add a new generator, but we have yet to get any costs or anything else for that, so I'll leave that there. None of that's in the budget, but the request has been made as of a few days ago. So for Area B, now Cortez had a higher average assessment change relative to last year, but there's some of these startup costs from the 2 new services are balancing out the requisition and pushing it down. So the big changes here are the first responder, which was delayed due to the pandemic, and then the community halls. Their first year expenses and rollout costs were a little bit higher. So 2021 has a little bit of a reserve transfer, and then I'll provide some future funding options down the road. We also have the fire is primarily up just because of the fire department's budget increase. I did include the $9,000 we just discussed on that last the fire tanker study, so that's all built in and it's funded by the operating reserve, so there would be no impact to the tax requisition for that for this year just because it's out of the reserve.
So I think, Mike, if you can go back there, Mike is underplaying his effort here and his role here, because what is important, I think, at the end of the day, if so Area B looks at all these services and consolidated, a net change would be 24 cents a house in 2021. So the average home in Cortez will see an increase of 24 cents for 2021.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Sorry, I skipped that point. And just for added clarity, you see a negative number on the per 100,000, and that's just because the housing values are increasing at a faster rate than the expense. So when you measure it on a per $100,000 increment, it'll show down.
And that relates to Director Lee's comments there, where the rate, the assessment went up, and therefore the per 100,000 obviously had to drop.
So for Area C, this was a big drop year over year, $10 per house. The next thing to talk about is the wharves and the park service. It looks like a big tax increase, but it's offset against the parks. We're just, for budgetary purposes, for visual purposes, we're just moving the 3 wharves and their associated budget out of parks, and we're lumping them in with the 3 other wharves that are in the service. We'll actually be looking to formalize and actually set that service up soon. But this is just for budget presentation. And
so
then,
for Director Abrams, you can see 100% net offset between the wharves and the park. We've taken exactly the amount out that we've put into wharves, so there is no net change to the taxpayers on Quadra for the wharves. It's a clean swap between the 2. And then when we consolidate for Area C, again, Mike once is understating his good work. When he consolidates the services, the area director can say that the average home on Quadra will see a $10.04 decrease in their taxes for 2021.
Could I just comment here at this point, or do we want to wait till the end?
If we can, he's just about through.
Yeah, I just got a couple more. But
I
here
want to
you
come
can
back to the point.
Sure.
Okay, but yeah, here you can see the effect of the drop of the requisition and the housing values. They really had an effect to push things down. So area D, there's an increase of $39.38 to $1,760. A big part of that is the assessment shift. The one thing to point out, and there's a great chart on the page 129 outlining this, but it's the managed forest lands in that area actually dropped by about $4 million this year. I'm assuming it must be a BC assessment decision. That's about 3.4%. So last year, that class absorbed about 26% of the overall tax requisition, but this year it's only absorbing about 24%. And again, that's just a shift of tax onto the residences. So you see down at the bottom, what we'll be talking about mainly, and this is fire and water. But those are defined service areas, and they don't include any of the managed forest lands. That's why the impact, if you see this, the relative size of these charts, it's a much more intense change just because of the drop in managed forest, but that was an experience with the fire and water, and that's why it's down there. So as far as fire, their budget did decline a bit this year because of the capital spending, but because they have a big 2023 purchase of I think it's $21 million for the fire hall, we have a bit of a bump in there just to catch up, or just to try and keep ahead of that big bill that we're coming. And then
Can
water.
I jump in on that one?
Okay.
Area D contracts fire service from Campbell River. We are not responsible for their capital costs towards their new fire hall. That is within city boundaries, and they should forget about us contributing to a $21 million build. We are paying for a service. We're not paying for capital improvements to the city of Campbell River. And I really object to that idea, whoever came up with it.
Okay, maybe that could be an offside discussion after this presentation.
Well, I think that it's wrong-minded to tax Area D people for a city
I get it, Brenda.
cost.
Yeah.
I get it. Just would like you to hang on until we get outside of this presentation.
Okay.
And
like I had to hang on about the wharfs. Okay, so let's just move along, Mike.
I want to get that in there.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah, the next point to talk about is water. We have a 2% requisition increase here. The big driver, and we're also recommending a user fee increase. The biggest driver is we had a huge volume increase, and that's the primary driver for the increased cost. We know that the city bulk water bylaw is a 1.25% price increase built in, and so if you just take the 14.9. You times that by a 1.25% increase, you're about 15.1% overall. We're recommending a 15.25 or $150 increase to the flat rate, and just used to keep pace. So I have a detailed model that tries to predict the cost, but if you're just looking at the the back of the napkin math, so to speak, you just take the known volume increase times the known rate increase, and you're at 15.1. And so the model came out to 15.25 because we cut a legal contingency, and then we have a slight buffer in there for any additional growth in 2021. And then
so the plan was, Mike, the plan was to transfer 258,000 out of gas tax for Area D water. Is that right? So should offset those extra costs.
Sorry, the 250
on a flat user fee thing.
Sorry, I didn't do any gas tax fund. A gas tax can't fund operational costs.
Okay, page 63, annual transfer of 258,000 gas tax for Area D water. Page 63 of the budget.
That would be for capital work.
Right.
Okay, continue, Mike.
Yeah, that would be the capital draw. We also had the other draw for the 30,000, which is built in. But anyway, I'll continue here. So again, the last four charts we just talked about was all residential values. These are the actual overall tax rate change. If you just look at the dollars the SRD is requisitioning from each area, this is the change. So area A, again, was primarily affected by the garbage thing. So if you actually normalize that to 2019, it would be significantly lower. But this is the kind of the newspaper headline, so to speak, of the actual tax increase we're seeing, and that inclusive of all the new services and everything. For the overall SRD, it's 0.47%. And that's what I got. Questions?
Okay. Questions. Brenda, you obviously have a question.
I have lots of questions.
Okay,
So
well, keep them. Can we them actually, you know what? I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute break before we go into questions. Is there any objection to that? Fine.
I lost you.
Break. I'll see you here at 10 after 11.
Hey, Mike, are you still there?
Yes.
Can I just ask you, this is off the meeting, but did the CVRD get it written into our financial plan somehow that we need $30,000 of gas tax reserves from Area D to be forwarded for the Black Creek Oyster Bay metering project?
Yes, that's not located anywhere in the 319, but if you look at the gas tax themselves, it's just a direct transfer out of function 135.
So we don't need board approval for that or anything?
Yeah, that will go to the board and then they would approve the budget, but the transfer draw is all embedded in the
budget. Okay, because I was going to ask if I needed to add that in or what. I had a meeting with Black Creek Oyster Bay on Monday. Yeah. And they were asking about that. Area C in Black Creek are putting in 70,000, and they've asked us if we could contribute 30,000.
Yeah.
To just upgrade their existing meters.
Yeah, I think he did the contribution a few years ago for the reservoir. So I looked at a bit of filing, but yeah, my general theory with that is I wanted to include as much of the stuff in the initial numbers, and then you could pull out if needed. So anything I know of is included in the numbers you see before you.
Okay. Is it snowing in Campbell River?
We had a light dusting on at our place today.
Yeah, we've got a couple flakes coming down out here, but they're little tiny, dry,
Yeah, that's what we got here. It's stopped now, but we had that earlier.
Oh, we've got it going on in Stories Beach, but it's very light.
You heard the weekend's supposed to have some bad weather, or not bad weather, but snow. Yeah.
Yikes.
Mr. Koopman says there's a cold front moving in, so it was Friday night to Sunday was the prediction for snow.
Yeah, I got to get out there and insulate my outdoor. I've got some insulation on my outdoor pipes, but I got to get out there and make sure nothing cracks. I don't think it'll get that cold.
Yeah, here's hoping. So I'm hoping the roads don't get too nasty.
My son was saying it was minus 51 in Grand Prairie yesterday.
Oh, but it's a dry cold, I guess. Yeah.
With a wind chill, minus 51.
Wow, yeah, it's hard for me to fathom. Like I hear that number, but
it's like I've been Siberia.
I've been down to like negative 15 or so, and that was cold. But I can't even understand negative 50.
I was in minus 40 in Grand Prairie last year before the pandemic hit. It was pretty weird.
Oh yeah.
Very, very cold and
That's where you get the
hostile
ice on the
environment.
eyebrows.
Yeah, very cold.
Hmm.
And Ottawa, my other son lives in Ottawa. I visited there maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it was -20.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But it wasn't too bad, you know. I could bundle up for it, but
Yeah.
not fond of the Alberta weather, northern Alberta.
No. No. Yeah, we really got lucky with the moderate temperatures by the ocean.
Well, it's been like springtime up until just yesterday. It's been like things are growing in the garden. I even had dandelions in my lawn already. You know, so
Yeah.
it's things were sprouting like crocuses and snowdrops and things. But anyway, we'll take it as it comes. It'll be spring pretty soon. Robins are back.
Okay, we got everybody back. It's been roughly 10 minutes or 5 minutes.
I'm here.
Gerald, you there? Nobody you there?
Yep, here.
Yep, we're here.
Okay. So let's proceed. Mike, are you have more to do or are you finished?
No, I'm done.
Okay, so Brenda, you were in the midst of asking a question when I called a break.
Well, I'm a little disturbed about the Area D water charges, especially with the increased assessments on residential, because we're paying we're paying about $1,100 for an average home, I think, for water last year. And if it's going up $150, you say, Mike, is
Yeah,
that just on the tax requisition, or is that including the taxation portion?
That was just the flat fee.
So the taxation portion would go up for people with highly assessed properties on the waterfront, which I find really an unfair way of applying a utility charge, because there's no other utility in BC that charges for gas or electricity or any other utility that charges based on a home value. And I think that is very questionable what the regional district is doing there, because you know, a person can live in a $1 million mansion and use the same amount of water as somebody who lives in a single trailer. And
Now, Director Lee, if that's something that like you want us to
well, I think
on,
it's legally challengeable. So I think that
no,
people.
it's not. But let me explain to you. If it's something that you want to transfer to all user fees, so we have two sources of income. We have the assessment-based tax and user fee. It doesn't matter to us how we collect it. We need enough money to run the system. If you want us to look at taking that that portion of the assessment out and transferring it all into user fees, that's fine with us. It doesn't
Well,
matter.
I'd like to see the scenario of how it would be applied either way, because there's only about 3% of the total properties in Area D that are, really high assessments, and then everybody else is pretty average. So I'd like to see how it averaged out if everybody was paying the same on their taxes, because to me, utilities should not be based on your assessment value. That's crazy.
So what we would
be,
do, we would simply, it's not difficult. What we would do is simply take the amount we're requisitioning and we would transfer that total 100% into user fees.
Okay, I'd like to see what that looks like on the average home.
Sounds to me like a meeting between Mike and Brenda and Dave and whoever else
I
needs to
don't
be
think
there.
it's a private meeting,
Count-
Jim. With all due respect, this is our budget meeting, and if I have legitimate budget questions, I need to ask them publicly in front of the public and not go into little private,
Okay, Brenda,
getaways.
Okay.
it is too late in the process for us to transfer that in 2021, that requisition in the user fees. That cannot be done this year. If it's something that you want to look at to move into 2022, we certainly can, but it is too late in the year to switch that
Well,
out.
let's start looking at those scenarios, because this is
We can do that as direction for 2022.
this is not a really great way to apply a tax.
Yeah.
Also, why in the Area D parks, why would it cost $40,000 to replace a slide at Middle Notch Park? I think $40,000 should just be reduced from the budget, and we should take the slide out altogether. Put something else in there that's less expensive, that's not $40,000. That's like $10 per household, or $7.
Okay, yeah, I could take anything out. Usually I get the budgets from the applicable manager. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty extravagant for one little slide in a park, $40,000. So, the parks planning needs to do a better job of finding, efficiencies in the parks budget.
Okay, Director Lee, with all due respect, parks equipment is expensive. It's not the expectation that the park staff are looking for every efficiency they can. We are not in control of what parks equipment cost.
So we don't need to replace the slide, though. We could do something else. Build a sandbox.
Okay, if it's direction of staff to take the slide out of the budget, we'll reduce the budget by that. It's not going to change the requisition by anything. It's a capital project. So
there were just a couple texts from Onico saying that purchase is being finalized. It was a carryover from last year.
Again, it's not going to have any impact to the budget, as it would come out of a capital. So it's not going to change the requisition at all. But if it's direction, we'll take it out.
If it's already financed from last year, as Director Anderson says, then just leave it then. But it just seems like a lot of money to spend on a kid's slide.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Is there any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'd really love to spend some time while the four of us are together to talk about our shared rural services. The one I'm most keenly interested in talking about is planning, as came up in our earlier East discussion. So I don't know if there was any staff presentation on the individual joint budgets, or if you just want me to launch. But I have some significant direction change I'd like to see in planning. So, Chair, how would you like to proceed?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may jump in, I just want to caution the committee that this budget is based on the one-on-one meetings and direction we provided to staff. It is now mid-February. If the committee is going to give us direction to have significant impact to the budget, this takes a ton of hours and effort by staff. And I want to caution the committee that this is not the opportunity to change 180 degrees. We simply don't have the time. That's why we have one-on-ones. That's why we have a process that we walk through. So it is mid-February here.
And if I might, Mr. Chair, this is the first time, here we are mid-February, this is the first time that the committee has taken a look at our joint services, including planning. The one-on-one discussions were about rural area specific single participant services. And I don't remember a budget cycle where we wait till February to talk about this for the very first time. So I have not been given an opportunity, I don't believe this committee has been given an opportunity to discuss the planning service. And I'm willing to have a number of meetings between now and the end of March. I'm not aware of another chance to have this discussion.
Okay, and I agree with you, Dr. Anderson, that we do need to have that discussion, but I also have to say that what Dave said is correct, that I highly doubt that there'd be opportunity to change action at this point, although I would love to. But we could certainly start having those meetings and do it for 2022. So I don't know what to say. I don't think that we can do justice to your direction that you want to go here between now and finalizing this budget. I think it would be haphazardly thrown together and not well thought out. And I think that we could do a much better job if we took our time and made sure that it happened for 2022. But it definitely needs to happen.
Well, I would suggest that we need to find a way to do it this year. And if we don't have the time because we start in February, then our budget process is not spacious enough. And I would submit that this is the foundational core reason that regional districts exist, is to provide official community plans and land use planning documents that are up to date in our areas. So I would respectfully really like to talk about our planning function here today. Because if we can't hear, then there's no opportunity in our whole budget process to do that. And that's not responsible.
I disagree, Mr. Chair. There's plenty of opportunity at any time for directors to bring up, and the one-on-ones were the opportunity for that. I respectfully disagree.
We were given on the one-on-ones budgets that had to do specifically only to our rural areas, and we were told to not talk about larger issues. And I'm continually told, and I reach out.
That's not accurate. That's not
staff.
accurate. Staff
that
aren't,
I
can't
talk to staff one-on-one, that it has to be at the board, so I can't get individual information from staff. So Chair, I request that we have a conversation about our planning function together as the rural areas that vote on this planning function together.
Okay, and like I said, I think you know, you and Dave were talking about two different issues. One, Dave is talking about the one-on-one. They do not, as I recall, deal with the general function. You know, do we have X number of dollars or Y number of dollars in the planning function? Does it have, you know, like this many desks or that many desks? We don't ever discuss that as we talk about our individual Area D, Area C, Area B planning items. That's the one-on-ones as I understand it. So if we need to have another type of meeting, I agree with that, but I don't think this is the day to do it. That's what I'm trying to say. First of all, we're not going to have time. It's already 11:20 and we have a 12:30 board meeting.
So I would ask then, Chair, that at our earliest convenience, we convene another EASC meeting that is specifically for our shared rural functions, because I think that in a budget planning process, it's appropriate to be able to talk about the budget in a way that is substantive, where we can add changes to the budget every year. Okay, and to be told that our first opportunity to talk about this service that we need to wait till next year is not on. I would like to say some things about it now, but I'd also like clearly that we don't have enough time to schedule another meeting to have a fulsome conversation about this in the very near future.
Okay, so the best thing that could be done, I think, would be a motion to have another meeting. How you're going to do that between now and whenever, I don't know. But
well, Mr. Chair, there's nothing stopping a director from producing a director's report for an EASC meeting on whatever subject matter they want. There's nothing stopping a director from preparing a resolution that staff prepare a report on whatever they wish. That's available for directors, you know, every day of the week. So there's nothing prohibiting that. There's nothing in 2020 that prohibited that.
Respectfully, in 12 years, I've never needed to produce an individual director's report to discussion about a shared function. And I think that we, in the 12 years I've been here, have updated one official community plan, being the Cortez one 10 years ago, and I don't think another one. And I don't think we've updated a zoning bylaw substantively in that time, comprehensively. And I believe that these two functions are the absolute core functions of what local government does. And what I'm noticing here on Cortez, speaking only for this community, is that we are in desperate need now of a larger integrated, some kind of integrated sustainability plan. We have a climate action plan underway. We have an economic action plan that was recently completed. We're in desperate need of a housing plan. The official community plan, it needs updated, but I don't even bring these things up. In my single participant discussion with staff in the fall, I said there are so many things that I would like to be moving forward on, but given that we have a decade backlog in getting to the core work that our local government is to do, I dare not even bring those up. But over the course of these few months, it has become so apparent to me with the housing crisis here and the economic impacts of COVID that it is not appropriate for us to have 10 and 20-year-old core planning documents. And so I would like to see provision in the 2020 budget for, speaking only for Cortez, for some kind of comprehensive planning process. And if we don't have the internal staff capacity to do that, as has been demonstrated the last number of years, that we find some way of hiring some professionals, engaging the social profit community here, which is incredibly more robust than it was 10 years ago. We now have 2 organizations whose mandate it is to support island-wide strategic planning that could very much assist with this process. We could apply for some funds from the gas tax planning process. I believe we could also use funds existing already in the Cortez Island gas tax fund for some of these planning purposes, but I never get the opportunity to talk with staff about this in a good way. And this is indeed a shared function. So if we can't do this basic work together, I don't know what we're doing here, and I can't support the budget. And I've never, ever not supported a budget. I want to be able to support our budgets at the end of really great discussion.
No, but would you like to make a motion?
To meet again?
Yes.
Yes.
Would you like to make that motion now?
Is that appropriate? I would move, if there's not another motion on the floor at present, I would move that the chair schedule another EASC meeting at our earliest opportunity to have a fulsome discussion about our shared services, our shared rural services.
Is there a seconder? I would step down from the chair at this moment and say second. Now, Brenda,
moved and seconded to have a special meeting to talk about our shared services. Is there any further discussion?
I have a comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Director Wally.
I think after listening to Director Anderson, I have a kind of a gist of where she's heading, what she's actually talking about. Area A has absolutely zero interest in any of these things, is not in favor of having a meeting to discuss them, and certainly as a contributor to the service doesn't want to pay 1 cent towards them.
Thank you, Director Wally. I guess I can't comment from the chair, but can I?
No.
No? Okay, well, I can't support Director Anderson's proposal because, and I'll just leave it at that. I can't say why, I guess, from the chair. So we've got a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. Call the question.
A comment. I absolutely believe that we need to have a conversation, not necessarily as comprehensive as Director Anderson is, but we need to have a conversation about what's going on at our regional district with regards to our very, very important planning documents and the need for a conversation about this as a joint function, which is what it is. We all pay. So, you know, to pawn it off to the single service discussions is totally inappropriate. It does not work there. You cannot talk about it there. You can't talk about it at my individual service discussion. I cannot talk about whether or not we should deal with Area D or Area B's planning documents. That's not appropriate, and nor would it be appropriate. So I'm going to support this motion to have a further discussion. That's all we're talking about. It may only be that in the end that we say we need to have a broader discussion for 2020, whatever, 22, because we're into 2021 already. All right, so that we have a discussion in 2022 or about 2022. We put it in place during 2021, and it takes place starting in whatever October when we start talking about budgets. So that I'm totally okay with that. I think that's a good thing to do.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Wally?
Yeah, I rarely would disagree with the other electoral directors on this, but I don't see why if a director has a specific concern concerning something in the planning budget or a direction they want planning to take, that they just don't put this on the agenda for the next electoral area meeting and we can deal with these one at a time. We got a whole year to talk about them. I don't think we need a special meeting to deal with this.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Is there any further? Director Anderson?
Thank you. With respect, this is that opportunity. This is the first, and now I'm being told too late, opportunity to have a discussion about our planning function. And if we can't offer budget amendments or can't ask staff to bring forward suggestions about how we can address some of these core planning functions, I honestly don't know how to do that. And I really want to kick my hats off to Mike that in many, many ways, this budget is so much more accessible and visually appealing and easy to access. And I'm really grateful for that. What I do notice in the comments at the bottom of a number of these budget spreadsheets, if you will, is sort of objectives for the service for the year. And some of them are relatively detailed and some of them are really lacking. And this planning budget, I have no idea what the work plan is in our planning department for 2021. It's not there. Now, a number of years ago, we used to vote on work plans and wrestle over them. And I can fully appreciate that perhaps that isn't the appropriate way to go. And our current CAO has pulled back from that, which I can get behind. But without even knowing what's on the work plan, I can't have a discussion about the budget if I don't even know what we're spending the budget on. I don't know this year whether the zoning bylaw in Cortez is going to be continued to be worked on. It's been on the agenda a long time. I haven't heard from staff in the last year. I don't know where the Quadra integrated sustainability plan is at. I don't know where the Area D OCP is at. So how can I support a budget when I don't understand its associated work plan? So I would like to know from staff what the work plan is so that we can have a fulsome discussion about whether it is budgeted appropriately. The budget is down on this one. I'm happy to bring the budget up. We've had a surplus carry forward of almost half of our budget the last number of years because of low staffing levels and inability to complete work. I believe it is our fundamental responsibility to find a way of doing these planning works. And if it can't be done in-house, we need to find another way of doing that. And I'm not willing to wait another year. And if we do, then the community is left with fundraising on its own and trying to do its own planning process that the regional district then doesn't sign off on. And it's the far cry from what we should be doing. So I would really request, I fully understand that Director Wally doesn't want to fund things in the planning department. I understand that Director Lee is happy with her 25-year-old OCP. I'm not going to try to infringe on those things. But this is the only place where Director Abram and I get to have a discussion to meet our foundational needs of our community in planning matters. And I would ask that this committee give us that opportunity to discuss options.
Okay, I think we've had
Thank
sufficient
you.
discussion on this issue, and I would like to call the question. Is there anyone opposed to this suggestion by Director Anderson to call a special meeting?
I'm opposed.
And I'm opposed. Motion's defeated. I would say bring forward your suggestions throughout the year for 2022.
Good advice.
So do we get to discuss any of the other shared services, or do we just adopt whatever staff brings to us? Planning
Well,
aside.
again, I'm going to disagree with the directors in that we've had other shared services that we've had discussions at one-on-ones, and I'll give you an example: bylaw enforcement, building inspection. Those are shared services, and we've had conversations, made changes, recommendations to the budget based on conversations with the directors. So I don't really see planning as much different. If you want to bring things up and have them supported, again, they need to be supported by the committee. So we follow recommendations of the committee and the board, and if there's direction to staff through those, then by all means, bring them up at any meeting. We're happy to deal with them, but they have to be, again, supported.
Well,
Okay,
and that's
now
what I'm trying to do here.
the vote's been taken, the issue's
Right,
dealt
correct.
with. So now I pass the chair back to Director Abrams so that we can
Yeah.
complete this meeting before the board starts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so were there any other items that were on the budget that need to be dealt with Mike and with the board or whatever?
You had a question,
Well,
Mr. Chair, about the war.
Right?
I think you had a
Pardon me,
question
Dave?
about the. I think you had a question
Yeah,
about the war.
I just wanted to I wanted to give everybody else the first opportunity, but now I will be glad to take it. So I gave a motion to Edie, I believe, on the ward. I want to see all of the money that's been allocated from the parks function to the wharves function, which doesn't exist yet, put back as these wharves are parks. They are parks. They were intended and developed and licensed as parks, okay? And the other, the TC wharves, the Transport Canada wharves, were divestitures from the federal government to us with a specific amount of money to go a specific number of years, and with some input from Transport Canada now and then. They still got their finger in the pie every now and then. I do not see I don't see the efficacy or even the legality of combining two functions money. Like, you're taking the money from my parks function and you're putting it into a function that doesn't exist. It's an endowment fund or whatever you want to call it.
No, Mr. Chair,
it's a fund.
if I may, Mr. Chair. So we have been funding wharves out of parks. That is a contradiction in which regional districts are to do. So we have been taking money from the parks and using it for wharves. All we are doing here is taking that exact amount of money and bringing clarity to the service and funding wharves through wharves and parks through parks with a zero requisition. We're transferring the appropriate money into the appropriate service. There is no change to taxation for people. It comes out of their same pocket, the same amount of money. It brings clarity and it follows the direction of the agreement that we were to establish a wharves function. Nobody is going to see the difference, except there's clarity in funding and providing resources to and taking them from the individual functions. Wharves is its own function in itself, and so is parks. We have been working with you for the last year or two to create its own service function. There's no robbing from Peter to pay Paul here.
No, we have not worked on creating the function, period.
We have-
Nobody has talked to me creating the function. We've talked about possibilities or whatever, but we have never, ever sat down and said, okay, so this is how it'll look and this is how we'll do it. And what I'm saying is that these wharves that you're calling wharves that are not parks, they are parks. They're on a parks lease from the provincial government. They have been run from the parks function ever since we built them. We, the community, built them. And they have operated for the use and enjoyment of the public. They are not operated as Transport Canada wharves, which were specifically designated by the federal government for the transportation of people and goods. That's not what these wharves are for. These are play. These are parks. They're someplace for people to go. The reality that they're actually a wharf is a necessity because you want to tie a boat up to them. You have to call it a wharf or something. Call it a provincial finger, whatever. I don't care. But my motion stands that I would like the money. Before I make the motion, I'd just like to say that if you mix that money from the parks function in with the money that is there from Transport Canada, they can never be mixed. They can never be one paying for the other because they are not. They were specifically put there to be spent on those specific wharves in specific pots. Each one had its own pot. That's the way it was developed. I was there.
Mr. Chair, you can move this motion, and I'll get feedback from Municipal Affairs and about its legality. But I'm telling you, we've been instructed: wharves are wharves, parks are parks. And so you call the question on this motion, and then I will bring back the legality of it, because there's clarity here in what you're insisting on doing. And I respectfully disagree with you. You're wrong. A wharf is a wharf, and a park is a park.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order. If you're going to make a motion, can you pass the chair back to me? If you're going to make a motion.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Back to you.
Okay. I'm chairing now. Have we received the report yet? Yeah, well, that's in the draft financial plan. Okay. So, Miss Director Abram, do you have a motion?
He's got it up there.
Yes, that I move that all of the money that has been allocated to the wharves, quote unquote, future function, which does not exist, be put back into the parks function, as these are parks wharves for the use and enjoyment of the public, not Transport Canada wharves for the movement of people and goods. That's simply, I realize it's a 100% draw. This money from here goes to this money here. It's the same amount of money. It's just in a different spot.
Okay, can we have a seconder? Is there a seconder? Anyone seconding?
I'll second that.
Director Anderson has seconded it, moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I'd love to hear the rationale from Director Abram about why this is your preferred thing to do.
Well, I thought I said it during the preamble when Dave was arguing with me about the fact that parks are parks and wharves are wharves. And sorry, we developed these wharves as parks, as extensions of the park, for the use of the park. The other wharves, federally, were developed for a completely different purpose at the federal level. And when they decided they didn't want to pay for them anymore, they divested them to us. with a specific amount of money for each one. I don't know how we can tax our taxpayers for wharves and then mix that money together under a wharves function, which is still to be discussed and worked out if it ever happens, to pay for Transport Canada wharves that they didn't ever ask us to take. You know, it was a divestiture. They weren't developed by us. They were developed by them. These were developed by us.
I'll remind you,
That's
Director
what
Abram, a condition upon accepting that money was the establishment of a wharves function be created.
Yes, but the wharves function was to fund those wharves. It never said that we had to fund anything that we stuck out in the water. It said we had to fund Port Neville, Owen Bay, Surge Narrows, and I think that was it. Weren't there three? I don't remember. That we had to develop a function for that. And I have been 100% in favor of that. You know that. I haven't said one word against it. And that we start actually putting some money into it at some point before our 10 years runs out, so that we won't have to have these humongous jumps of taxation year after year. We could just level it out. We pay for the wharves, but it's those wharves. These wharves are not wharves, they're parks. And
Okay, I
they're
think
being used as parks.
we've had enough discussion on this. I don't think we need to go further. I have a motion on the table, moved and seconded. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, it's carried. And back to you, Director Abram, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brenda, for running it. Okay, request for number 5, request for economic development funding, electoral areas.
Jim, I didn't know that we were done the budget discussion. I would like an answer to a question I've asked. I'm happy to ask it again.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, given that we're not going to have a more fulsome discussion, apparently on our shared services, I would like to know from staff what is on the work plan for long-range planning this year, what is intended to be addressed. And then after hearing the answer to that, I may well make a motion.
Well, that's a pretty in-depth question there. I suggest you make a motion. Staff will prepare a report. I can't sit here on the fly and tell you, what's on the work plan, what we're going to do. We have many priorities that are interrupting those work plans. So if you want a staff report on it, certainly make a motion and we'll provide that.
I'm just asking long-range planning. So, okay, I'll ask it specifically. Is the Cortez zoning bylaw update still on the 2021 work plan?
Mr. Chair, I think it's appropriate. We're having a budget discussion here. If there's a resolution, happy to provide a staff report on it.
No, but why don't you just make the motion for a report?
I'm gobsmacked. I don't know how we can have a budget discussion that isn't tied to a work plan understanding. They are intrinsically related. I'm stunned. So yes, I would like a report on the work plan for planning.
Okay.
I'll second that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So the motion is basically that you're asking for a report on the plan for, did you say specifically planning or just work plan?
No, the function 500 planning, because every other year that I remember, we've known what's on the work plan and therefore we can make motions accordingly, because I would love to see some funds put aside either from taxation or from gas tax to do a comprehensive community planning process here. I hear that there's one happening on Quadra. I haven't had any kind of report on it, but they're linked. So I'm now hearing that we've missed any opportunity to discuss this before we've even had an opportunity to discuss this. And I just don't know where to go with that. So I guess I'll look for alternative funding sources in the community to lead it, because we can't wait another decade.
You've made the motion, it's been seconded. And is there any further discussion on it? Or is there anyone opposed? Motion passes. We will be looking forward to work plan. Okay. Now, are we done with that one?
Yes.
Item 4?
Do we need to move
Okay.
first passage of the budget?
No,
Our
I don't think
committee.
there's any resolutions there, is there?
No.
No, there is.
Don't
Okay,
we
on to
usually
item 5.
recommended
Okay.
plan that we adopt, and then there's 3
I
iterations
think that
of the
happened.
budget usually?
Does that not happen at the board, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would happen at the board, not here.
Unless there's direction for us to look at the EA's changes within theirs, we'll consolidate it and bring it to the board for recommendation.
I think
Okay,
the report should
Rhonda?
go back to EASC, not to the board. We need to discuss it at EASC at some point.
Clearly, which puts it completely out of this year's timeframe.
Yeah.
My understanding was that the report would go back to EASC.
What report are you talking about?
It's EASC money, the report that Director Anderson's referring to on the work plan. It should go back to EASC before it goes to the board.
Yeah, nobody's disagreeing with that.
Oh, I thought you said you were taking it to the board.
No.
Okay, are we on number 5 now?
We are on number 5.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. This is on the CAO's report. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Passed.
Move
Item
recommendations. Move recommendations B 1 to 3.
Second.
Oh, pardon me, 1 and 2. No, 1 to 3.
Second.
Okay, recommendation has been moved B 1, 2, 3. Seconded, discussion. Any opposed? Carried. Item 6, request for financial assistance, museum at Campbell River.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, on receipt of the CAO's report. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Carries. Item B, committee recommend $1,000 from area C.
Move B.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Sorry, anyone opposed? Carried. Okay, now we get on to J, bylaws, bylaw number 9495.
Move receipt of
Shelley.
CAO.
Can you share screen, Tom?
Move receipt of the CAO's report.
Second.
And I note on this one in the CEO's report, there are a number of recommendations embedded in the report that don't show up on the agenda. There are 6 of them.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
I have comment. I have comment on number 6. Okay, so receipt of the report. Tom, are you trying to say something?
I was, yes.
Okay, it's just not coming through. Sorry. Go ahead.
My apologies. I was just going to offer an explanation to the question if the chair would like.
I absolutely would.
Thank you. So the pardon me, the report that you're looking at is simply the same report that went to the board. It was immediately referred to EASC. There was no explanation or no additional direction regarding the content of the report or recommendation. So it's simply presented as it was presented at the board with the recommendations that were provided to the board last meeting, and simply following the board's direction to refer it to EASC before the board considers these recommendations further.
So just for clarity, did EASC pass these 6 recommendations previously?
I would have to check, Mr. Chairman.
It was my understanding that the entire thing was referred to here. Is that correct?
But it would have been referred to board that would have got it from us. And so when we last saw this report at the end of last year, I think, I would think we would have passed these 6 recommendations to the board, and then for the board to finally consider. And I don't remember why it was referred back to us. So I'm just looking for institutional memory on this one, please.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the EASC made a recommendation to the board that the bylaws be subject to a number of, quote, minor amendments, which then led to this report coming to the board. I stand to be corrected, but that's my recollection. Yeah.
So is it staff's recommendation at this point that this committee pass the 6 resolutions embedded in the staff report to move the Shell proposal forward?
Yes.
But that was never voted on.
No.
Okay.
It went
So
to the
it's
board.
here. It's before us here today.
Those were the recommendations, and then it was, yeah.
And have those minor adjustments been made or deemed not necessary? Is there any reason that we can't carry on with these recommendations in front of us at this time?
Mr. Chairman, all of the recommended changes outlined in the staff recommendations are embedded in the copy of the bylaw attached to the report. I believe in a tracking mode, so they can be easily seen.
Great. So I would.
Just a minute. I want to speak before any motions are made. We, in subsequent to our discussions with Mr. Shelnick and Dan Bowen this morning, I believe that the issue of a definition of a temporary campground stay, temporary accommodation in that Schedule A for bylaws 95 and 96 have to be looked at and defined. I don't think they're defined. And it's going to cause problems down the road, possibly. If people move in there and take up semi-permanent residence, I believe bylaws should identify what is actually going to happen and give us some certainty as to what's going to happen before we take it to public hearing. I'm also concerned about the water supply, and I'd like to be more certain about how the water is going to be delivered to this number of people. Maybe we'll find that out on a referral, but we don't know until we define who's going to be living there, if this campground is going to be residential in nature or not. And yeah, those things need to be fleshed out with the owner before you go to public hearing. Otherwise, we're just putting up a dead duck.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Now I would like to ask you to take the chair so that
Yes,
I can speak to this and make.
I got your chair again. I took your chair away.
Okay, thank you. Please don't. Okay, so the question came up from Director Anderson about the 6 items in the first part of the report, and I have some problems with them, especially number 6. Number 6 is basically asking that we take the largest single development proposal that Quadra Island has ever had, and we do it on a virtual Teams meeting, which in the past, I have heard nothing but negative comments about people not being able to get on Teams or be able to get into the phone number or whatever. And they basically felt like they had not had their say. So I am totally not in agreement with this public hearing being virtual, that it needs to be after the however long this may be, when the pandemic is under control. The community would expect nothing less than an in-person meeting. A virtual public hearing would be a total misrepresentation of community wishes that have already come to me over the past many months and years. Well, not years, since the pandemic. So, you know, I would really feel that we would be doing a disservice to both the applicant, the regional district, and my community especially, to do this as a virtual public hearing. That's comment number one. All of those items throughout, I truly appreciate staff's work in going through and doing the track changes. I think that was a really good way of doing it, so that we could look at it and see, you know, what's happening here, what's happening there. Did you change this or not? And many of the changes didn't go in direction of the community wishes, they went in direction of the developer's wishes. So, you know, like a percentage might have gone from rather 50 from 50 to 40, or from 20 to 10, or whatever. I'm not going to stand by those. I'm just giving examples. The commercial area, nothing was done with that. The marina area, nothing was done with that. The campground area, the sizes, they were actually made big. The number of cabins, the fact that there's going to be a cafe. We have 3 cafes in Guathiaski Cove proper, which is, you know, what, 2 kilometers maybe away from here. All 3 of them struggling to stay open. Not just because of COVID, but because of the island, you know, the size of the island, the number of people that go out, et cetera, et cetera. The whole issue of that ecologically significant mud flat, you know, that's being glossed over in my mind as being an old log dump. I'm sorry, those type of areas are considered to be, according to all of the people that I know in the ecological world, they are the most significant habitat for all types of life, whatever it may be. So, you know, I find that any disturbance there may be a problem. I realize the access and egress is going to be dealt with at highways. I cannot, in my wildest dreams, understand how highways would allow the access of a 50-foot RV to turn on or off of that narrow road. I'm not concerned about the traffic on the road, like was mentioned by the presenters. That was not the issue, the number of vehicles back and forth. That wasn't the issue. The issue was access and egress to commercial, marina, campground, all of those things. And they all have to come off of that road. The parks and trails were reduced from 40 to, or from 50 to 40. Things like accessory buildings are okay in the front yard. Well, we've never had that in any of our bylaws. Solar requirements, they've been deleted, which was part of the sales job on this proposal was that it was going to adhere to all of these, different kinds of new technologies, et cetera. The conditions for bonus density has been removed. I don't think that the minor amendments that were made in any way meet what I expected as the director, and what the community would have expected had they seen the original and now the new. I don't think that they would actually get there. The other part of it is this, the two documents that are required at the end of the process. I believe Dan Bowen mentioned them. The servicing agreement and the master agreement or something. I'd have to ask staff to clarify what those two things are called. But those don't happen until the very end, and they don't necessarily cover the issues that are embedded in the bylaw, and they may not be able to because the bylaw is already there. And then if you try and override them with the master agreement or the service agreement or whatever, you wouldn't be allowed to. So, once again, that's sort of putting the cart before the horse here. People want to know what those things are way before they agree to any kind of a bylaw that says this is the way it is. I don't have any problem with the fact that the numbers that are desired.
Is there?
Excuse me, I wasn't quite finished.
Okay.
I don't have any problem with the fact that, the numbers are being proposed. They'll either be turned down or not. The one thing that was mentioned in passing very quickly, we talked about the sewer and this being a bonus, which I agree, it would have been a bonus to the sewer system and the people that are paying the annual sewer fees because there'd be more people. However, one thing we're going to have to do probably is replace the sewer system, replace the sewer plant. So, the addition of all of these properties may exacerbate that problem. But secondly, the mention of Dan's of phasing. We don't know what the phasing is. We don't know if it's, April Point Road, Harbor Road, the main road to down by the school. Which one of those is going to happen first? And what is that going to do as far as the development of the community in general? Because part of this idea originally was to sort of blend into the Quathiaski Cove sewer or Quathiaski Cove official community plan area, and to be sort of a buffer between it and the rural areas to the north. If we don't know what the plan is with the phasing, we can't make an intelligent decision on that part of it. So, right now, having a hard time with it. I am definitely not in favor of a public hearing prior to a public hearing, in-person public hearing. So, I can't say yes to that. So that probably means I can't say yes to anything. I don't know. What are the options here? I guess I'd have to ask Dave or Tom or somebody.
I would suggest from the chair that, what's being proposed at the board this afternoon is a virtual public hearing for March 10th. And I would suggest that we still have issues that need investigating. It's the road, the water, the sewer, the amount that's being given up for public parkland, there's a number of issues that you've raised. I would like that issue of camping and defining what that means in Schedule A about temporary accommodation, those things should be straightened out before you take it to public hearing. This is a big proposal. This is very important to people on Quadra Island that we get it right. And I would just suggest that we, a motion come forward to postpone the public hearing until those questions are resolved by planning and written into the proposal that's proposed to go to public hearing. So that's my.
The motion would be from here, from the Electoral Area Services Committee, to postpone any public hearing until such time as all of the pertinent questions that were asked of the Electoral Area Services Committee have been answered.
I think that would be appropriate. Do I have a seconder? Is there a seconder? I'll step out of the chair to second it.
Thank you.
So who are you handing the chair to?
Back to Director Abram.
If he's the mover, I don't know that that's appropriate.
Well, he already moved it from outside of the chair, so now he's in the chair.
Okay, I'd like to speak to the matter if whoever's chairing.
Okay, well, I guess now that it's been seconded, it's gone back to Brenda. So Brenda.
Thank you. So Director Anderson, did you have something?
I don't think this is an appropriate motion, only because there wasn't a clear list of questions that came up from their presentation that I think is reasonable for them to know how to answer. I think most of the questions that were asked were addressed. What I heard about about the water was that would, the clarity around that would come at a different stage. There was some lack of clarity around the 2-week camping provision, whether that was in the bylaw or not. I haven't heard from staff. But I'm hearing from Director Abram that there are a number of parts of the application that he would have liked to have seen be different. And I appreciate that this is a huge application and that there's a lot of back and forth, and that Director Abram and many committee members have put a huge amount of time into trying to make this the best application it can be. But in the end, it is the applicant who decides what they're putting forward to the public. And so I think at this point, given the years of effort, it's incumbent upon us indeed to move forward with this. And so I would like to see, motion, 2 through 5 passed, and then we can have the discussion about public hearing. I concur that it is really not ideal to have public hearings about things of this magnitude in this time, but I have no indication that we're going to be able to meet even in the next year or two in a mass way. The vaccines that are coming out are not sure at all to be able to address the variants that we're seeing, and we can't put these kinds of things on hold because of that. We did a public hearing on Cortez that was for the biggest application that I think Cortez had ever seen, and it went relatively well. People participated. And so maybe there's some kind of hybrid version that can happen in a few different public spaces and online. And I just don't think we can indefinitely postpone this. So I'm not comfortable with asking the applicant to answer a bunch of questions that weren't outlined that I think have largely already been answered.
Thank you, Director Anderson. Are there any other comments on this application?
Yes, I have a question or a point.
Director Abram?
I have a complete list of all of the things that I mentioned in my presentation. If you would like them, I can send them to you right now by email. And then you will have a concrete question and answer scenario. These are the questions I need answered.
And are they questions or recommended input for change?
They're both.
Yeah, point of order, go through the chair, please. No back and forth.
Chair, they are both. Item number 6, I don't know how we can approve a portion of the CAO's report and not approve item number 6. Why are we doing that? If it's not going to go to public hearing, then what's the point? Why not just do what's proposed in the motion, which is deal with these issues. Let's look at what happens with COVID, and perhaps there will be an opportunity in maybe April to go to public hearing, virtually or otherwise. March is out for me. I have other things that I cannot get out of. I cannot be at a public hearing. As you know, I have medical issues, and I am not going to deal with something like this when I can't be there.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? We've got 15 minutes before our board meeting starts. So I'd like to make a decision on this and then move on to.
Can we see the motion, please?
Can you put the motion up, please, Edith?
I believe the motion is to receive.
We're still on receipt? Okay, I'll call the question on receipt. Is there any objections to receipt? Hearing none, that carries. Subsequent motion, Director Abram?
I believe that's the one that Edith has. Is it? Or did I make another one before that?
The motion I think that you made, that maybe the receipt motion was still on the floor for, was that this be, I don't know, postponed until the applicant was able to answer the questions asked in the presentation or something to that effect. And then Brenda seconded it, and I thought that's what was on the floor, but apparently receipt was still on the floor. I think that's what's happened.
Okay, so we've received it. So now the motion is, Director Abram, do you have it? Just to clarify for Edie.
I don't have the one that Edith has in front of her. I don't have it in front of me because I sent it to her.
Okay, Edith, do you have the motion that Director Abram sent you?
I didn't get it.
Well, Jim, you just offered something verbally a couple of minutes ago. Could you paraphrase that again? About answering questions?
I think we lost
okay,
Jim.
So
there he is.
I'm here.
Okay.
My verbal motion was that, based on what Brenda had mentioned, was that we, since this is going to the board, that it go as a recommendation, not just discussion, that the recommendation be that until we have received comment and answers from the proponent regarding the proposal, that the public hearing be postponed until that time.
I think you had previously said answers to the questions posed at the presentation today, or answers to what?
Okay,
Yeah. The proposal with respect to transportation, water,
all right.
camping definitions.
If until we have received comment and answers regarding the questions asked today, comma, regarding the questions asked today. Yeah, thank you, Edie, for wordsmithing for me.
You got to take
Until
out
we
the
have
word proposal. Take out the word proposal, Edith. Okay, there.
Okay. Until we receive comment and answers from the proponent regarding the questions asked today, that the public hearing be postponed until that time. I think that's pretty straightforward. It doesn't set any time, and it gives us the opportunity to decide whether or not it's going to be virtual or not virtual.
Do I have a seconder to this motion?
Also,
Gerald is second, Director Wally has seconded it. Moved and seconded. Okay, we can vote on this. We've got 10 minutes before the board meeting now, so I'm going to call the question on it. Are there any directors opposed to this motion? Hearing none, this carries. Pass it back to
Thank you.
Director Abram.
Okay, I'll try and be quick on the rest, if that's possible. All right, so we're at correspondence, director's reports, addendum items. I had one, but I'm gonna just defer it until the next meeting.
Move termination.
Proposed. No, we have a proposed addition to reserve Clahousse First Nation that has been added late, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was the addendum. Didn't you just defer that? That was the addendum.
No, sorry. It wasn't on there before. It came on today, I believe.
I would
Okay,
move
so
that the addendum be deferred to the next meeting.
the addendum be deferred. Is that what you said?
To the next meeting. Yes, please.
Is there a seconder?
Mr. Chair, I believe this is on the board meeting as well, so.
No, it's not. No.
It's not? Okay.
No.
Sorry.
Well, that's another bad.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, we're moving to defer the item till the next meeting. Is there any time sensitivity? See, if not, anybody opposed to deferring it to the next meeting? Okay, it's passed.
Move
We're
to
on
Termination. Move termination.
Okay, moved, seconded, all those in favor, or not, anybody opposed? Good.